Hey everybody, back again, talking Unmaking a Murder. So today we are on we're talking strategy 8. Strategy 8 is procure dishonest witnesses. Yeah, this chapter basically goes through how you get people to just say the things that, how Vogel and them were getting people to say the things that they needed them to say and stuff like that. So, there, you start out, first off, with the grooming of Penny Bernstein. Okay. The first thing that happens is that when she's in the hospital is Judy Dvorak immediately says right off the bat, oh, that sounds like Stephen Avery, even though Penny said there was brown eyes. So, but she says, oh, yeah, that sounds like Stephen Avery. Okay, well. Then you get Cush in there after this happens. Now, Cush comes in there and draws this drawing. Now, Cush, when he gets deposed and all that, claims that he never saw the picture of the mugshot. But here's the problem. His picture doesn't look like Stephen the way he looked at the time, the way Penny would have been describing him presently. Because Stephen had straighter looking hair than he did in the previous mugshot. No. In the picture that he draws, Stephen has bushy, kind of curly looking hair. Yeah. The picture he drew looks exactly like the mugshot. So that's the problem there. And yeah, he's claiming he never saw the mugshot. Oh, it may have been there, but blah blah blah, whatever. Bull. He's full of it. So that's the problem with Cush. The other thing is that Penny gave like this disjointed statement. First off, when she first got there, she was being tended to by the physicians and the doctors and things like that. She was getting like stitches. And she had to get x-rays, like head x-rays, things like that. So she was constantly being, interrupted in the interview with Judy Dvorak so that the doctors could do things with her and stuff. So she gives this really long kind of statement eventually that's not her own hand, that Judy Dvorak is just over there. That it's not videotaped or anything. Judy is just over there taking the notes herself. Judy Dvorak was doing the notes herself. Okay? She wrote down everything there. So everything that was written down there was written by her, the way she remembers it happening, or the way she was writing it down as it happened, right? Okay. So after they're done, she basically puts the statement in front of Penny and says, "Here, this is the statement. Sign it." And Penny says, "I can't read that right now. My vision's too blurry." To which Judy Dvorak just says, "Just sign it." Really? Just sign it. She didn't get to check it and make sure that you didn't take any liberties over there taking notes. I mean, give me a break. This is just, this is not an honest way to go about things. That's all I'm saying. And I think a lot of people would agree. When they eventually got around to the point where they had her before they brought her in to check out a lineup. It's kind of interesting. It took her 10 minutes, almost 10 minutes, to pick out Stephen. She sat there for 10 minutes looking at these guys in the lineup. Almost 10 minutes before she picked out Stephen. It was, in my mind, it was showing that she was beginning to think that Stephen didn't really fit her, the description, or the, what she remembered. Because why would it take 10 minutes? I mean, she'd already picked his photo out before. But then again, he'd look different now than his photo looked. That's an interesting kind of point. In the photo I said, he had like curlyish looking hair. He looked different. And now he had like straighter looking hair and stuff. So he didn't actually look like he did in the photo. And this could have been a problem for her. So it's interesting that it took her almost 10 minutes to pick Stephen out that time. The other issue that they bring up is the fact that Stephen's hands were like perpetually greasy, working at the salvage yard, working on cars and pulling them apart and doing all those sorts of things. His hands, everybody attested to the fact that whenever they saw Stephen, his hands were always greasy and stuff like that. And one of the officers even comments on it when he was arrested that night of the 29th or whatever, that his hands were greasy. Penny claims, and always claimed, and never wavered from it, that her attacker had clean hands. So So how do we explain that? How do you explain that? How, so yeah, these were issues. I mean, it's hard to believe that this many things could just go by without any, without it just getting somebody's attention that goes, wait a second, what's going on here, and makes them start looking into the investigation or looking into Vogel and these people. But whatever that, like I said, it looks like they control the game there in a lot of ways. But anyways, then we move on to this detective Fred Nicholson. This is the guy that apparently did the whole run from the crime scene to the salvage yard to Green Bay, did this whole run or whatever, and figured out how Stephen could have done it in the amount of time that was necessary. Few problems I have with that. Number one, he did not stop at the salvage yard. He basically just pulled through and left. If you know anything about when you have multiple kids and you're trying to get them ready to leave and go somewhere, it is nothing like a quick thing, generally. You get them, you got them all like fussing and whatever, and then you're trying to get them in the car, and you're telling everybody, make sure you go to the bathroom before we go, and and then always there's one that doesn't listen, and then as you're getting into the car, you look at them and go, did you go to the bathroom? And of course, at that point, they say no, and then you're telling them, go to the bathroom, and then while they go to the bathroom, two other kids that were already in the car and ready to go pop out one of the other doors, and they start running around and playing, and so, I mean, maybe having a little bit of fun with this, but I mean, anybody that knows with multiple kids, it's not gonna go just boom, lickety split, just like that. So that's a little problem I have with this guy's estimation of the timing. The other thing is you got to account for the fact that when they got there, they had to negotiate city streets and traffic and traffic lights and things like that. And then they not only went to this paint store, but they went to a couple other places. They actually got something to eat and stuff like that. So there just wasn't enough time. And this guy basically came up with this timeline where he was going 20 miles over the speed limit everywhere, and everything like that. And that's how he was able to make it with like 5 or 10 minutes to spare or something like that. So it just didn't work because, like I said, number one, he cut out the whole deal of having to deal with loading up the kids and Lori. And then he's just going 20 miles over the speed limit all the time. I mean, that's something that's likely to draw attention to you. But, if you were doing that. But I don't think Stephen was, because you can only imagine if he was driving 20 miles over the speed limit, Lori would have been getting pissed off, like the kids are in the car. But whatever, obviously they had this theory that Stephen was just this degenerate and wouldn't care about such things, obviously. Anyways, you can tell that they had a very poor opinion of him. Anyways, so then we move into Cush again here. Cush, I have an issue here with this part of it, because there was the discrepancy with Penny in the eye color. She first said brown, then she eventually changed it to blue, most likely because she was being browbeat by Peterson and Dvorak and stuff like that. But when she was given, when they're deposing Cush about the drawing and stuff like that, they're asking, well, didn't you ask her about eye color? Because they're trying to figure out what color she was saying the eyes were, because they obviously see this obvious problem here where she was being fed information, or she was being kind of, without maybe realizing it, manipulated. And so he comes back with this flimsy answer of, oh, well, yeah, it does. It would normally be a very normal question to ask, but seeing as it was a charcoal drawing that I was doing, it didn't seem necessary. It's like, are you kidding me that you wouldn't ask eye color of the assailant? I mean, even if you weren't putting that in right then or whatever, but you're telling me you wouldn't even ask? I mean, come on. That's like one of the very first questions you would ever ask about any assailant, from anybody. You would ask about hair color, skin color, eye color, those things where you could get a definitive indication of a color or whatever that you, so that you could use them as kind of definitive facts to work from. So, but yeah, so Cush was very unsatisfying with his answers, in my opinion. So Then we move on to Kosarek. Kosarek, yeah, he's a piece of work. But, you know, he shows up with his group of guys there to arrest Steven on the 29th and stuff. And Steven comes down, and as he sees everything there, and he sees all the officers there, and I think there was about 8 of them or so, if I remember correctly. And he gets down there, and no doubt there was a couple of those officers talking about what they were there for or something, and Steven must have caught, he must have heard them saying something. Because when Lori gets down there, Steven, she's like, what's going on? And Steven turns around because he's like looking at all of them, and he's like, whatever, I guess, when she gets down there, and she's like, what's going on? And he turns around and looks at her, and he goes, they say I murdered a woman, kind of thing. So where would he have gotten any idea of anything, why they were there? But he certainly saw that there was people there. But they tried to use this statement against him in court, like, because Kosarek's trying to say, oh, we never said that it was a woman. Well, there wasn't actually a murder. So what part of that statement can we take seriously at all? I mean, I'm guessing he said whatever he said right there because he heard something that was being said down there when he got down there, and it gave him some kind of an indication of what you guys were doing, what they were doing there. That's my feeling about it. It seems, obvious because, number one, it wasn't a murder. So that's just obvious to me. But anyway, so then we'll move on to Sherry Culhane. She certainly does seem like a dishonest witness. Looking at her in the Hallbach trial and in the Pearson trial. So, but they go over here where she does a hair analysis of some hair that between Gregory Allen's hair and Stephen Allen's hair. And she gave the opinion in court that to a reasonable degree of scientific, accuracy or whatever, that she could say that the hair was Stephen Avery's, that it matched the hair from the crime scene. Stephen's hair matched the hair that was found at the crime scene. And when they get her up on the stand, they basically shoot it full of holes, because they go, actually, it wouldn't be uncommon if you took 10 people's hair, and if 9 people's hair looked exactly the same, that wouldn't be uncommon, would it? And she had to answer, no, yeah, it's very common for that to happen, and that sort of thing. So it ended up taking away, some of the thunder from her hair analysis, and rightfully so, because even by her own admission, it was not a very good method of identification in the first place. Because, like I said, if 9 out of 10 people can look almost identical like that, I mean, it's crazy. But so then we move into the whole cat incident. Shaun talks about the whole cat incident here. And generally how the way that people have used it to define Stephen's character and say that he's a psychopath and that sort of stuff. So what's going on here is that I agree with everybody 100%. What happened with the cat was horrible. The problem is that there's different accounts of what happened. There's different accounts, and so it's hard to say what exactly did happen. But the fact of the matter is that it happened, and it was horrible. Stephen regrets it. He did his time for it. Whatever, he's, all that's done with. But, I mean, there's even claims that it wasn't him. There's even claims that it was somebody else. And like I said, there's a few different claims of this cat story. This cat story is... It's hard to say what exactly happened. I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm just saying it's hard to say what exactly did happen. And the fact is that anybody that was there that was involved with it, it's pretty horrible. But at least Steve showed remorse. At least Stephen Avery showed remorse for it, and he took his medicine. He took his lumps. So, and the reason why this comes up is because they use this incident so much to try to speak to Stephen Avery's character. So, well, let's talk about Stephen Avery's character here. And Shaun does here, and that's why we'll talk about it. So, you got all these jailhouse snitches while he was in for his first wrongful conviction, talking about how he was in there, he was making these, drawing torture chambers, and saying how he was going to do all these horrible things, and that women were he was using all this degrading language and that sort of stuff. I'm not going to repeat what some of the stuff is, but all these various claims that were made about him and how much he resented women and all that sort of stuff. Yet, when he gets exonerated and he gets out, he immediately forgives Penny Brinson right away, without reservation, and recognizes her as a victim of the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department, just like he is. Doesn't sound like a guy that's harboring a hell of a lot of hate for women. Sounds like his hate was directed right where he wanted it. Sounds like his resentment was directed right where he wanted it. So keep that in mind. Basically, it leaves me with the feeling that any part of the person that he was when the cat incident happened, and this is something that Shaun says as well, any part of that person that he was when that all went down was gone by the time he was getting out of prison and getting exonerated for that first wrongful conviction. Because he just so quickly and immediately forgives Penny. And that's the way I feel about it. So then we'll move on where Shaun talks here about the towel incident a bit. There's been so much stock put in that. Well, number one, I feel the same as Shaun. It's not, to me, that very odd that people answer the door in a towel. Okay, I work in service, and I have to go to people's homes and stuff like that. I've seen people answer the door that way. Not because they wanted to greet me that way. It just happened that they were doing something and they obviously were expecting somebody, or thought somebody might come by. They might have had a few minutes to jump in the shower or whatever, but they didn't want me to walk away. So it happens. And so I don't put as much stock in it. But then what Shaun goes into even further here is that the towel incident didn't even happen with Teresa. It actually happened with the girl that had the route before Teresa. So I don't, that looks like more Ken Karat's doctoring there, and stuff like that. So then you go on to the fact that the boss was deposed about Teresa saying that she wanted to be removed from that route, that he had originally said that she had asked to be removed from the route. Well, he was deposed later about that, and he claimed that Teresa had never requested any removal from the route. So all these conflicting statements, all these conflicting reports, and then you get down to how much stock they try to put into this Star 67 call. The Star 67 stuff is just ridiculous to me. The Star 67 stuff doesn't even matter to me. You know why? Because he had already called Auto Trader. The chick was already up. He already created a paper trail. He was probably just dialing Star 67 out of memory, out of just muscle memory. That's just habit. He was doing that because he was getting famous. He was getting a lot of notoriety because of being on TV and stuff about the Stephen Avery bill and all that sort of stuff. So I can't put as much stock in that as so many people want to seem to do. But it's when you see a lot of the other misdirection and BS that kind of happens in this case, the Star 67 is very weak. In my opinion, very weak. And then you move on to statements like Peterson saying it would have been much easier to kill Stephen Avery than it would have been to frame him. Yeah, that's just we'll just leave it on gems like that. When you got your law enforcement making statements like that on television. So that pretty much wraps up here the strategy 8. Strategy 8, which is procuring dishonest witnesses. So I hope you guys have all found it interesting. I know that I have found Shaun's book incredibly interesting, and like I've said before, if you're just coming off of Making a Murderer, I definitely suggest this book. Pick it up and have a read. Like I said, I'll give you a lot of good places where you can maybe start, because trust me, after you finish the documentary, you take a look at all the documents and you're just like, it's overwhelming. So I can imagine. So this might give you an idea of some places where you could dive into the documents and start from, and maybe make it a little less imposing to you. So anyways, if you haven't already, please hit subscribe, and we'll see you guys later.